Hey guys, the Curious Owl here, and this is my Top 5 Wednesday video for this week. This week's theme is talking about books that you wish you would have read when you were younger. So basically, this is just exactly as it sounds. You talk about some of your favorite books that you wish you would have read when you were a lot younger. A lot of these is for things that I wish I would have learned a lot earlier in my life, because I've read a lot of books that have taught me some important things or have made me understand some things a little bit better. These books that I'm going to talk about are not in any particular order, as unlike last week, but these are all books that I think that I honestly wish I would have read when I was a little younger, because I think that they really would have impacted a lot of my reading style now and the things that I read currently. So without further ado, let me get into some of them. So first and foremost actually is the Beautiful Creatures novellas that I've been currently reading within my reread of the Beautiful Creatures series. The reason I wish that I would have read these when I was a little younger is because at the time that I read the original main series of the Beautiful Creatures world, which was Beautiful Creatures, Beautiful Darkness, Beautiful Chaos, and Beautiful Redemption, I had no knowledge of any of the novellas that were coming out. I had no knowledge of the spin-off novels that came out after the main series. And part of the reason I wanted to do this reread was because I wanted to be able to read those for the first time. And after having read all of the novellas at this point and going to be starting on the spin-off, one of the first spin-off novels here very soon, I honestly wish that I would have been paying a little bit more attention to the writing community and the writing world when I was in high school, when I first read this series, because I would have loved to get my hands on these novellas and spin-off novels as soon as they had come out. But unfortunately, at the time that I was reading these, I was not even involved with the BookTube community. It was not even a thought in my head. I didn't even know about the BookTube community until I got into college. So I am a little upset that I didn't get to these books when I was younger, but I am really glad that I did get to read them finally, and I have loved pretty much every single one of them. The next is a much more recent read, actually an audiobook that I just finished, and again, this kind of goes back to something where I wish I would have read it when I was a little younger, like in high school, and that is The Alchemist by Michael Scott. Now, this is a series that I distinctly remember hearing a lot about in about middle school, early high school-ish. This was a book that did come out in 2010, so I was about middle school age when this series first came out. And I remember hearing so many of my friends really liking it, and especially in high school, how a lot of my friends were like, if you like fantasy, you need to read this, or if you like urban fantasy stuff, you need to get into this series because it is wonderful. But when I read this audiobook, I was really surprised how much I enjoyed it. I really, truly enjoyed Nicholas Flamel as a character and the kind of stakes that were involved within the story, because right from the beginning of the story, there are such high stakes for Nicholas as his wife is kidnapped, and there's this bad guy that's been chasing him for 500 years that has now gotten this really important artifact that essentially has the secrets to immortal life, and he's going to use it for nefarious purposes. And without this codex, basically, Nicholas Flamel and his wife are going to slowly wither away. And there's this whole thing about the main characters, who are these twins, that they have a huge part in this story. And I really honestly enjoyed it, because there was a point too where there was a lot of back and forth of whether or not one of the characters was actually going to stay good or if he was going to turn to the bad side. I just found so many great things about it that I was surprised that I didn't end up picking this up a lot earlier, because I think especially in my high school years, when I was really getting into fantasy stuff and really getting into urban fantasy especially, that this didn't even cross my mind. I remember where it sat on my high school library's bookshelf, but I never touched it. I never even found the interest to read it, and I'm kind of kicking myself honestly because of it. Next is a much more recent read, and that is More Happy Than Not by Adam Silvera. So if you guys watched if you watched my August wrap-up, basically, you'll know that this was a book that really, really did a lot for me. And it actually inspired me to come out with a video talking about my sexuality and finally actually coming out about my own sexuality. And that's because this book really hit the nail on the head for me as what it felt like to go through the questioning aspect of, discovering your sexuality and whether or not you truly are straight or if you are something different from that. And I think this book just really had hit so many things on the head for me in the questioning stage of things, really, that I felt so connected to Adam, because this is an Own Voices novel, as Adam is gay, and this deals with a gay character who's essentially trying to figure out whether or not he is gay, and he's really questioning a lot of things about his sexuality and about who he likes and what he wants in life. And I think that just in any capacity, you know, the questioning aspect for any person, whether it turns out that you're gay or lesbian or bisexual or pan, I think the questioning aspect for a lot of people is very similar, and I have never seen a book that has talked about that. I've seen books that have had characters who are very set with their sexuality, and a lot of it is them having to fight the outside forces based on their sexuality. And this book was the first one I had come across that talked about the questioning aspect of it and the constant back and forth, the constant self-doubt and self-hatred because you don't understand what's going on with yourself. And I was so floored by it that I had the inspiration to make a video talking about my own sexuality and how I came to terms with it at 21 years old. And I just was so happy to have read that because it really just took this huge weight off my chest to understand that somebody else understood what I was going through. In that same vein, I had another book that I read within this last year that I really honestly felt understood me in a lot of ways, and that is the story of We're Okay by Nina LaCour. This was another audiobook that I read, I think this past summer. I might have been in July, maybe April. I'm not quite sure now that I think about it. I know it was earlier this year. But this deals with a girl who is not only bisexual or gay, one of the two, but she has recently dealt with the loss of her grandfather, and it has affected her incredibly. Essentially, it puts her into this spiraling depression, and she's not quite sure as to why he passed and what exactly happened to him. And she doesn't know whether or not, you know, she's going to be able to move on from that. And having lost my own grandfather when I was 13, I definitely kind of hit this point a lot with the idea of not really understanding what had happened, and the grieving aspect of it, I think, was just so spot on for me because I thought that, you know, I was the only one that dealt with, you know, really upsetting times after losing someone that was very close to you, and I felt like nobody understood what it was like to lose a grandfather who was such a huge part of your life, because mine was there for pretty much everything that my sister and I did. And so when we lost him, it was really hard, and it still is sometimes hard to talk about him, and I'm going to try not to cry, but just the book itself, I think, really hit a lot of things that I didn't expect it to hit in terms of losing family and understanding, you know, grief and things of that nature. And I just really had a lot of love for it because I felt like it really understood me. And finally, the last book that I want to talk about is another audiobook, but this one really just opened my mind up a lot to things that I didn't quite understand, but I felt like I understand a lot more after having listened to this book, and that is The Female of the Species by Mindy McGinnis. I do remember listening to this like towards the end of last semester, like about April, May-ish, and I truly enjoyed it. I really liked a lot of things about this book. It was hard, it was rough, it was very, very raw in its content because it's a book that essentially talks about sexual assault and rape and things of that nature, and just how awful it is to live in a small town that has no clear idea about rape and, you know, the consequences of it and what happens to those who are rape victims. Because there's a storyline where one of the characters loses a sister that was, her sister was killed because somebody decided to go and rape her and then kill her and leave her in the woods, basically. And a lot of the story is her trying to avenge her sister's death by trying to take out anyone else that is considered a rapist. She's almost like, she's kind of pre-Dexter-ish is what I would describe her to be. Then there's a character who is a preacher's kid. She's named PK. Everyone kind of thinks that she's this goody two-shoes, and there's some things that she doesn't understand. She gets to know this particular character that loses her sister, who was named Alex, and they form a very unlikely friendship. And Alex, though, unfortunately comes across PK before she's going to be raped, thankfully saves her, and there's kind of this whole thing that kind of explodes from there. And then there's another character who falls in love with Alex, and he has always had, you know, this relationship with this one girl and has sex very, very often. And he kind of learns that, you know, sex is not like the most important part of a relationship, and he never forced her to have sex. But the thing is I think that he grows as a human being because of the fact that he understands that sex is not like the crux of a relationship. Like, there's much more to it, and he understands that because he truly has strong feelings for Alex, and he grows to love her more despite the fact that he doesn't get to have sex with her, which I thought was so great because it showcases that you don't need sex to have a good relationship. So there you guys go. Those are my top 5 books that I wish I would have read when I was younger, because I feel like these books all honestly did different things for me. 2 books I wish I would have read a little younger because I had such great feelings about them that I can't believe I didn't read them when I was younger. And 3 others because I think that they would have really helped me a lot growing up in these particular times because of the things that they touched on and expanded my mind on and things of that nature. And I just wish that some of them would have came out a little earlier when I was a lot younger so that I could have read them at that time and probably would have changed my mind on a lot of things. But, yeah, so let me know what your guys' thoughts are down in the comments below and what books you think you should have read when you were younger and what makes you think that way. Like, I would like to know, like, what books you wanted to read when you were younger and why that is, because there's tons of different reasons why you could. But anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me in this video. If you guys did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not already and you'd like to be, hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock. And I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.